As EU leaders gathered for their regular summit on Thursday, they insisted that they could handle the conflict in Ukraine and the war in the Middle East, as well as keep an eye on tensions in the Balkans and Nagorno-Karabakh. But these statements should be interpreted with caution. Politico reports, according to the columnist, European officials are already recognizing that the conflict between Israel and Hamas is increasingly overshadowing the Ukrainian crisis in the eyes of Europeans, and the fighting in the Gaza Strip has become the main topic of the summit, despite the ambitions of European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, who intends to turn the EU into a geopolitical power. The simultaneous development of the two conflicts will clearly be a serious test for Europeans, especially if we remember that they have not yet been able to fully develop a unified position on Israel, says the author of the article. As the journalist emphasizes, even a seemingly simple step such as the need to call for a ceasefire to deliver humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip has already provoked a whole diplomatic waltz, while there is some movement in this direction mainly thanks to the efforts of the Spanish government. Germany and a number of other countries of the bloc do not dare to make calls for a prolonged pause in hostilities, fearing that such statements could be seen as an encroachment on Israel's right to counter the Islamists from Hamas, while the conflict in Ukraine in 2022 has had an invigorating effect on the unity of EU countries, forcing them to show unprecedented cohesion. The Middle East crisis, despite its equally far-reaching consequences, has not so strongly solidarized Europeans. According to Politico, as the columnist explains, this is partly due to the fact that individual leaders are afraid of conflicts within their own countries between supporters of Israel and the Palestinians, as well as other manifestations of destabilization, whether it be attacks by individual militants or large-scale protests. The recent terrorist attacks in France and Belgium have exacerbated these fears, and they are also playing into the hands of various far-right parties ahead of European elections scheduled for June next year. The author notes, European experts recognize that resolving both conflicts simultaneously will be a challenge for Europe, as it will have to divide attention and financial resources between Ukraine and Gaza, and it will be difficult to maintain the same levels of macroeconomic and military aid to Kiev. Politico writes, the Ukrainian authorities have become even more active in urging the West to maintain military supplies, including ammunition and air defense equipment, and on Thursday, Volodymyr Zelensky addressed a special message to EU leaders, the journalist said. Meanwhile, Poland and the Baltics, which remain Ukraine's staunchest allies within the EU, have warned their Western European counterparts not to lose sight of the fighting on the bloc's eastern borders. According to Politico, Lithuanian Foreign Minister Gabrielius Landsbergis already lamented the distraction of the Middle East last Monday, but diplomats from several other EU countries agree, believing that the bloc should not be distracted from the dramatic events unfolding in its backyard. However, Brussels' policy in the Middle East has already begun to harm its Ukrainian initiatives. The moral authority that Brussels used to have in developing countries and, in particular, in the Islamic world, is rapidly disappearing, as the European Commission's position there is seen as excessively pro-Israeli. Politico's columnist warns, as experts note, the more the death toll of Gaza civilians grows, the more the perception of EU hypocrisy and double standards will take hold. Meanwhile, the EU has also managed to damage its own foreign policy ambitions by demonstrating cacophony and disagreement after the attack on Israel by Hamas militants. One member of the European Commission said that the EU is suspending aid to the Palestinians, but he was immediately corrected by another, explaining that the aid program would not be suspended, but would only be reviewed in the end. The head of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, made a visit to Israel and came under a barrage of criticism from the European Parliament, which considered the gesture too biased and noted that the official never called on Israel to respect international law on Gaza. Politico reports, While disagreements between various European institutions have long been commonplace, a conflict between members of von der Leyen's team, and in full view of the public, is a different matter, the columnist said.